Hey there, everybody. Welcome once again to Tell the Truth. Nice of you to come back. Thank you, Johnny Olson. Our first guest today went on a trip in a kayak, but he sure wasn't going to Nyack, and he wasn't getting away from it all either. You'll find out more about that as soon as we say hello to the panel here on To Tell the Truth.
Bill Cullen. Peggy Cass. I never know why you don't know how. Dennis Sir. And Kitty Carlisle. You don't know how to tell the truth. Yeah.
Hey there, everybody organized?
Oh,
That's more than I am. It's one of those days. I invite you to look at the screen at something I hope is going to show up. By way of introducing our first guest, I'd like you to look at some film. Now, that looks like a sailboat, but it isn't. It is a boat that is sailable, but actually it's a kayak, which is a form of a canoe. More about that later. Now, despite the fact that you saw sails on the vessels, as I say, it's really a kayak, our next guest paddled it on an unprecedented fact-finding voyage that lasted for 40 days. And let's meet that gentleman right now.
Number one, what is your name, please?
My name is Joel Fogel.
Number two.
My name is Joel Fogel.
Number three.
My name is Joel Fogel.
Two of them are just kidding, of course. Only one of them's real. Let's find out about this. Here is the Joel Fogel story as follows. I, Joel Fogel, am horrified about the pollution of our waters. Recently, I paddled 1,500 miles in a kayak down the intercoastal waterway from New York to Miami to study and film man's abuse of the water. The pollution was beyond belief. The harbors were particularly bad, but even in the desolate wilderness, it was impossible to escape dead fish, slime, scum, beer cans, oil slicks, tar, and other debris. I saw garbage being tossed into the water from private homes and ships' bilges being emptied into the water. What's even more frightening is that almost 70% of all the seafood that we eat on the East Coast spends some part of its life cycle in the polluted waters of the intercoastal waterway. We had better reassess our attitude toward the water. If we don't, we're in real trouble. Signed, Joel Fogel. And while the assembled Fogels are getting comfortable, why don't you just stay comfortable? We'll be back in a second.
Hi, folks. I'm Alex Trebek. Your chance to play. Now, the
big trick is to find out which one of these three sturdy gentlemen is the real Joel Fogel, who found pollution on the inland waterway absolutely frightening. And let's start the questioning, please, with Kitty Carlisle.
Thank you. Number one, should we not eat fish at all?
I've stopped eating almost everything except tuna fish and open sea things, I'll tell you.
Tuna fish and what?
Open sea feeders, fish that don't spend part of their life cycle in the inland waterway.
I see. Number two, we can't eat fish anymore, and we can't eat grains or animals because of pesticides and mercury. What are we supposed to live on, boiled water?
Well, it's not absolutely impossible to eat any of these foods, of course. It's merely a matter of choice.
Being aware.
There are more and less polluted fish,
you.
such as tuna.
Number three, I was in Seattle recently, and they have managed in 4 years to clean up the whole coast around there that was so polluted you couldn't even swim. Why can't we do that now with all our intercoastal waterways?
I guess we can. It's just primarily, I guess, a question of how much we want to commit ourselves to cleaning it up.
Number two, is industry more to blame than people who throw garbage into the water?
Industry is certainly more to blame than people who throw garbage into the water as individuals, but not necessarily more to blame than the municipalities that don't pay proper attention to sewage treatment. A large part of the pollution which I encountered on my trip was due to more or less untreated sewage just dumped into this valuable
Number
water.
one, were you alone in the...
Thank you, Kitty. Let's go down to Bill Cullen, please.
Number one, is there any legislation, any national legislation, I imagine it would have to be national, to combat pollution?
Yes, there is. The Clean Waters Act was passed several years ago, which actually places responsibility on municipalities to handle their own area with some federal muscle behind it. But there's been law since 98, and no one's paid any attention to it.
Obviously, the laws, although they're passed, number 3, have not been enforced. Number 3, why haven't they been enforced? In your, I assume you, I'm not just putting that question to you, I assume you've studied this. Number 3.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, it's been a bit of a political question, I guess, and primarily because of that, very few people have had the political backbone to enforce this problem.
Number 2, in taking your kayak down the inland waterway or intercoastal waterway, how many times were you required to go outside, to coin a phrase?
Go outside the waterway itself?
Yes, yes.
Very few. My whole purpose, actually, was to stay in the waterway because it's a sort of estuarial place in which most fish spend one part of their breeding cycle, you see.
No.
When you get outside that, the purpose of the experiment was sort of lost.
Thank you. No.
Thank you, Bill. Let's go to Peggy Cash.
No, and why do these fish go to the inland waterway?
Well, they don't. They go there to lay their eggs, and also the food that a lot of the fish feed on breed there. The diatoms, the plankton, and so on.
I see. But number 2, would you tell me some fish that are in the inland waterway so that I won't eat them?
Oh, bluefish, all the shellfish, of course.
No kidding.
The shellfish are really the worst, especially the ones that spend their whole lives there. But even shrimp.
Well, number 3. Now, is it like the Chesapeake Bay? Is that part of the inland waterway?
Yes, the upper regions of the Chesapeake are part of the inland waterway.
Now, number 1, up on Maine, that's not part of the inland waterway, is it?
No.
Oh, then you can eat lobster.
I'm not so sure that I would trust it.
What? Well, I don't like tuna fish that much. I'm out of luck. But number 2, people are always passing big bond issues to clean up the pollution. I know we did it in New York, and it gets dirtier all the time. What do they do with the money?
I'm sure the money is being spent. The trouble is that the magnitude of the problem is simply immense. Every day, for instance, roughly, I believe, 80 million gallons of raw sewage are poured into the intracoastal waterway itself by municipalities, and that doesn't include industrial pollution. So
Okay, thank you. That takes us to Bennett.
I read in the paper yesterday a fellow fell into Lake Erie and he didn't drown. He suffocated.
I believe it.
Number 1, where does the coastal waterway start? On the northern end?
I don't know. I started in New York Harbor.
Well, when did you hit the inland waters?
At Manasquan Inlet, just north of Atlantic City, about 40 miles.
Number 3, where did you first get into the inland waters after leaving the open waters of New York Harbor and so forth?
Manasquan Inlet.
Number 2, do you agree with that?
Manasquan Inlet, yes.
When you got down to Florida, number 2, do you remember riding along inside the Florida Canal?
Not the Florida Canal, no.
Where were you where is it in Florida?
Well, in Florida, actually, I entered Florida slightly outside the waterway. That was one of the few times when I did go out. There had been a storm, and I was interested in testing the seaworthiness of the craft, which is quite an interesting thing in itself, especially with the sails and the wind that comes up. But I went down about halfway, just riding outside the waterway, and then went down inside the various estuaries and canals that have been dug there.
Number 2, again, when you went outside, where did you find yourself? What waters?
Just right outside. I was never more than a mile or at most 2 miles from land.
Where were you? What body of water were you in?
The Atlantic Ocean is the gentleman's answer, and that's all the time we've got for questions or answers. We must vote. We must mark our ballots. And what would you do? For 1? Or would you mark your ballot for 2? Or would you mark it for 3? $50 is the cost of a wrong vote, $500 in the event that none of the votes is correct, and Kitty must start. And Kitty,
It's very
you seem
difficult.
somewhat undecided.
It's very difficult because I think 1 and 3 are the same person. I think they're twins. I'm sure they're twins. I want to vote for 1 and 3, but I had to put down one number, so I voted for 1.
All right. Bill Cullen?
Bennett and I were talking before the program, and I said one thing you can't do on this show is to try to outthink the production staff. And I think I'm being hoisted by my own petard, Bennett. I figure a fellow who goes down all the way on in a kayak is like that has to have a beard, right? And because of that, I voted for the fellow without a beard, figuring if he had a beard, they would have made him shave it off, right? So that's the reason.
You got a very good beat on the production staff, and let's go to Peggy.
It's never worked yet.
Well, I think they were all very good, but I voted for number 2 because, well, I know he knew all those fish that you're not supposed to eat anymore.
Okay, and Bennett, what are you going to do?
Well, I'm glad I'm all alone, because when I'm wrong, I can be the only one wrong. I think number 3 is the proper gentleman.
Well, safely covered all down the line. 1, 2, and 3. And what did you do at home? Will the real Joel Fogel please stand up? Yeah. Thank you, Joel. Be back to see you in a minute. Let's check out number 1. Number 1, sir, what is your real name, please, and what do you do?
My name is Brayton Harris, and I'm a commander in the United States Navy.
Right. And the Navy does not empty its bilges in the waterway. They can't even get in there.
Not when you're looking, anyway.
And number 2, sir, you got 2 wrong votes. What is your real name and what do you do?
My name is Jonathan Stabler, and I'm a securities analyst with Arnold Bernard and Company.
Joel, amongst the other things you have accomplished today is to ruin me totally, because very shortly here I'm taking a trip down the inland waterway to which I've been looking forward. I have my camera all set, and now I know what I'm going to photograph. Sludge, slime, dead fish. Whoopee. Is there any hope?
Yes, I think there's hope, but it's a matter of, as I said to, I believe, Mr. Bennett, it's a matter of individual commitment at this point. I don't think we all have to paddle kayaks 1,500 miles, but we're going to have to be pretty determined to do something about the problems we have.
Don't we have a situation where fines do exist for industry, but it is cheaper for them to pay the fines than it is to correct their situation?
Yes, I think that's true, but I think that's going to be changed too, because it has to be changed. We've so long looked at our waterways and skies as boundless dumping grounds. And
there is no place where you can throw anything away. There is no longer an away. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here with us on To Tell the Truth. Now, I would like to have you meet somebody who has a very famous name, but I won't tell you what it is. I'll give you a small hint, however. Our next guest comes to us from Sherwood Forest. Who could that be?
Maid Marian?
Maid Marian. Friar Tuck.
Commercial. Now let's meet our guest with the famous name.
Number 1, what is your name, please?
My name is Robin Hood.
Number 2.
My name is Robin Hood.
Number 3.
My name is Robin Hood.
All right, and here is Robin Hood's story. Listen as I read it. I, Robin Hood, have been teased about my name all my life. Any friend of mine named John is automatically referred to as Little John. Jokers ask me such questions as, have you seen the Sheriff of Nottingham lately? Or how are things in Sherwood Forest? Finally, however, my name earned me a wonderful reward. The city of Nottingham, England, had a festival, and the city officials invited 5 Americans named Robin Hood to come as honored guests for the celebration. We were given tours of castles and cathedrals. We watched modern-day knights compete in jousting and archery contests, and feasted on peacock, suckling pig, and that famous medieval drink, mead. From now on, if anyone asks me how are things in Sherwood Forest, I'll be able to truthfully answer, just fine, thank you. Signed, Robin Hood. And let's start the questioning with the author of a brand new book called The Sound of Laughter, Mr. Bennett Cerf.
Thank you, Gary. Number 2, I read in your affidavit that you feasted on mead. Is mead an intoxicating drink?
Yes.
Well, how was a little fellow like you able to get some of that in England?
Well, I didn't get too much.
Who gave it to you?
Well, they let me try a little. My parents let me try a little, but not too much.
Number 1, what does mead taste like?
It doesn't taste alcoholic, really. It's sort of a beer, I guess, but it hits you pretty hard.
Tastes like a beer, you say?
No, it's sweet. It's made from honey.
Thank you. Number 3, what's the name of the girl in Robin Hood?
Maid Marian.
Right. Number 2, again, may I ask you, what part of England did you go to first? Where is Nottingham?
In the Midlands.
Number 1, where is Nottingham?
Thank you, Bennett. And Kitty?
Goodness. Number 3, you were carrying a longbow, right?
Yes.
And what were they made of in the time of Robin Hood?
Wood. I don't know.
You don't know what kind of
I don't
wood?
know what-
Do you know number 2?
No.
Number 2, did you ever resent being called Robin Hood before you had this glorious trip?
Well, no, not too much. Sometimes it got to be a little...
Did you ask your parents, number 1, why they named you Robin Hood?
Oh, quite frequently.
And what did they say?
Well, usually they tell me because they never want anybody to forget my name.
Number 3, when you went to Nottingham, how far was Sherwood Forest?
Sherwood Forest extends about 14 or 15 miles from Nottingham.
And is it now a national park?
No, not exactly. It's owned privately and publicly.
And number 2, when you saw the jousting...
Thank you, Peggy. And Bill Cullen, what do you want to know? Kitty, what did I call
See,
you?
I said before about we had 2 beards and 1 beard. Now we got 2 girl Robin Hoods and 1 boy Robin Hood. I'm going to start with number 1. Number 1, I'm anxious to know why they did this to you. What was your father's name?
My father's name is Bill.
Bill Hood, right? But he called you Robin.
Right.
I think that's a dirty trick. Number 3, your father's name, please.
My father's name is Charles.
Charlie Hood. now we got number 2. Number 2, what was your father called name?
Paul Hood.
And do you resent the fact, number 2, that he named you Robin?
No.
You happy with the idea?
Yes.
Number 1, Robin Hood number 1. When you got over there to Sherwood Forest, what were your duties? They must have had something they wanted you to do over there when you arrived. What did you have to do? Not have to. What did they ask you to do?
Well, really, I didn't have to do too much. They just wanted me to enjoy myself, and they took me on tours of the countryside, and I was present at some of, like, the banquets and things that they had.
Number 3.
Okay, now let's call on Kitty.
Peggy?
I know, but I called her Peggy before, so I owe her 1 equal time.
Number
so I'm calling
2.
you Kitty for this.
Did you meet the sheriff of Nottingham?
Yes.
What was he like?
Well, he was dressed in a long black robe with white lace around here. He was at the reception at the airport.
Was he a nice fella?
Yes.
Number 3, it says that you ate peacocks. What do peacocks taste like?
Well, peacock tastes like quail. It's very greasy.
Ugh.
But I like quail.
Well, do people eat peacocks a lot around Nottingham?
I don't think it's one of the general things. It's just something they had for the special banquet.
Number 1, did they recreate things like the battle between Little John and Friar Tuck on a Friar Truck?
No, you can say it's fire truck, right?
Well, anyway, you know, on that
Fire truck.
over the stream, do they have all that stuff? Number 1.
No, I didn't see anything like that. There was some jousting and some archery contests and things.
Number 3,
That does it. That's all the time we have for questions. We hope it's been enough to help you make up your mind as to whether it's number 1, or is it number 2, or could it possibly be number 3? Who knows? It costs you $50 for each wrong guess, $500 if all the guesses are rotten, and Bennett, because you're our honored guest, you get the rotten job of going first.
Well, number 2 knows an awful lot, but number 1 looks to me like Robin Hood. So I took number 1.
Okay. And Kitty?
I voted for number 2 because he knew all about what the sheriff wore at the reception, and he knew all about mead and it's being alcoholic, and he's got nice parents who would just let him have a taste of it, and so I voted for number 2.
And you would like to take him home with you, I can tell. And Bill?
You said Midland's good, too. But you see, once again, I've dedicated myself to outthinking the producer here. We had 2 beards and no beard, and I voted for no beard. Now we got
Right.
2 girls and a boy, and I'm going to vote for one of the girls, because because not the boy. That's
You mean because the obvious thing is to have a boy?
Right.
So
But
you're
they
voting
wouldn't-
for the unobvious?
Right, so I was torn between 2 girls, which hasn't happened to me for a long time. But I'm closer to number 1, so I voted for her. There you are.
All right, it says 2 for 1 and 1 for 2, and what is Peggy going to do?
Well, I voted for number 3 because you know something? Peacocks make an awful lot of noise and everything, and I bet they're greasy.
Oh, boy. Well, the votes are all in. Will the real Robin Hood please stand up? There you go. number 2, what is your real name and what do you do?
My real name is David Bragdon, and I'm in the 6th grade at Friends Seminary here in New York.
Ah. Very bright young man. Number 3, you got one wrong vote. What is your real name, please, and what do you do?
My name is Mary Blackwood, and I'm a nature photographer.
Good. You know, what was fascinating to me was that the little boy, usually I say Robin Hood. Right. Most people say Robin Hood. Right. But nobody really calls themselves that way. You wouldn't say my name is Bennett Cerf. Right. You say Bennett Cerf. The other two said my name is Robin Hood. Yeah. Thank you, Robin Hood and Robin Hood and Robin Hood, for being here with us on To Tell the Truth. Envelope and Bennett Cerf, it's been fun having you with us. Do come
I had
again.
a very good
Panel,
time.
take care. Goodbye, friends. Happy weekend.
In addition to the cash awards, our central characters today will receive Cara, a carousel wig, shaggy back, side tendrils, bangs, and a crown of curls, an easy care 100% monocrylic wig from Carousel. Transportation and other considerations provided by Chevrolet, featuring the 1971 Impala with side guard door beams, more wheelbase, more glass, more sound-deadening materials, all at a Chevrolet price. This is Johnny Olson speaking for To Tell the Truth, a Mark Goodson, Bill Todman production.
I'm gonna try to keep you